Mariam, did you watch the Jamison Whiting episode where I absolutely crushed him on the basketball court? Were you cheering me on? Were you like, yes, take him down?
I will say, I did get motion sickness while I was watching it. Yeah, you guys got ice cream.
I also crushed him on the basketball court.
You also crushed him on the basketball court.
We're rolling. We're rolling.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. I have nothing else going on today.
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now.
Maybe we'll do Lord of the Rings special effects where you walk a little bit ahead of me so you appear larger, and I walk a little bit behind you and I appear smaller.
That's
so you can be Gandalf and I can be a hobbit.
Okay.
Okay. So here we are on the Wedge Live podcast on the shores of Lake Nokomis in Ward 11. We're here with Mariam Demello, who is running for City Council, Minneapolis City Council in Ward 11. Thank you for joining me on a walk around Lake Nokomis.
Thank you for not making me get on a bike.
So let's get right into it. Why are you running? Running for City Council is you're kind of upending your life a little bit by running for City Council, running for any kind of office. Why do it?
So I feel like our city has gone through a lot in the last few years, and I just feel like we need more of a moderate voice on the City Council. So I just want to get back to really having decorum, really focusing on what it means to run a city, how to manage a city budget, being able to have tough conversations. And I just want more of a moderate voice on the council. I want to get back to the days of, the Paul Wellstones, the Martin Sabos. I know they're Congress people, but we just need more of that, rational, logical, moderate voice.
So what do we mean when we say moderate? It gets thrown around a lot lately. Ideologically speaking, let's define moderate a little bit.
Obviously a Democrat, someone who just has those true blue democratic values, but also just really thinking and focusing about what we can and can't do as an American society, and focusing on the real issues, and not to get into national politics too much. But I feel like part of the reason why Trump is our commander-in-chief the second time, which is absolutely nuts, is because the Democrats have just been so disjointed. And you have Democrats, that are really very DFL oriented, and then they hear all this stuff about identity politics and things that sound woke to them. I hate using that word, but I'll use it. And I think it scares a lot of them, and then they go red. And I just, not to beat the horse to death, I mean, we're just so torn up as a society that it's crazy that we have to distinguish ourselves between being a moderate Democrat or, Democrat Socialists of America. It's just, that's tearing our political ideology and our culture apart, I believe. And on that note, being a moderate, looking at socialism, and we're getting right to it, I guess. Socialism is never going to work in America so long as we have racism. When you look at, and I'm a nerd, I'm going to geek out a lot. When you look at other societies that have socialism, they have a 50% income tax, or they're very homogeneous. And as long as we have rhetoric that's like, I'm not going to pay because this person doesn't want to work, or this person is different than me, socialism won't work.
So you talked about decorum and being a moderate. Can you think of like things that have happened? It sounds like you want to run to be a city council member to change the tone at City Hall, to change the way things operate. Can you talk about things that have happened that you disagree with, that haven't gone the way you think? Maybe it's a policy thing or a decorum thing that you can think of where, you know, the kind of thing that's motivating you to run?
Yeah, so I'm on the Minneapolis Charter Commission, so I have a very unique perspective of how City Hall should work. And from like a policy standpoint, and I've worked for Melvin Carter, I've worked for municipal government, both Minneapolis and St. Paul, for a very long time now. There are things where you can achieve as a city and things you can't. And personally, I feel like when someone has a very differing viewpoint than you, that's, you know, extremely left, and, you know, you're on the opposite viewpoint, you just need to be able to just sit down and have an honest conversation about why you feel that way, what the differences are, and just have more of an open door policy where people can talk to each other and not have this cancel culture that we have. Like the cancel culture, you can see it ensue at City Hall. It's just like, just because I have a different opinion of you than you.
Who's getting canceled? Let's name names. Who got canceled?
Well, I think
Mayor
Fry.
Let's revive them. Did Mayor Fry get canceled?
He is getting canceled to an extent. I mean,
but from that perspective, maybe he's canceling other people. Is it cancel just another word for like severe criticism? I feel like people are on both sides are giving and taking criticism.
When I think of cancel, I think of you're not going to even listen to anybody. You're getting to the point where you won't have a conversation with someone. You just close your door and that's it. And that's not cool.
Have we seen that from the more moderate side as well? Like deciding it's not even worth talking to these leftists, these DSA types. Have we seen it on both sides?
I think canceling? You see it on both sides. Everyone, I feel like, well, not everyone. A lot of what's going on at City Hall, people can share the blame. Mm-hmm. Mayor, council members, you know, it's just, when you get to a point though, when you become disrespectful and you say F the mayor, that creates like a wall. Right. So when that happens, people just shut down. And I really want to get into City Hall as a moderate voice to just be like, I hear you, I'm going to give you time, I want to listen to why you feel differently than me, and just really talk about it. Like the other day, a few weeks ago, I know you were at the Minneapolis Charter Commission meeting with council. You know, I went on the record and I'm like, this is how, you know, a majority of us on the charter feel about this particular issue, and it involved the appointment of department directors. And I'm not going to get into the weeds on that, but one council member, I could tell she just didn't agree with what I had to say. And, you know, when the meeting was over, I reached out to her and I'm like, I know you're busy, I would love to sit down and just talk about this, like 30 minutes of your time. And we did. And we had a really good, productive conversation, and listening to them speak, I just was like, oh, I didn't think of all these other issues that come up from this. Thank you for sharing, you know? And that doesn't take a lot of time, effort, or energy. It's like being a decent human being, like listen to what other people have to say and give people the same amount of respect and courtesy that you would want.
So let's talk about the Charter Commission and their government structure. That's up for debate again after we changed our government structure in 2021. So mayoral appointments is what you're referring to, and whether the council should get a confirmation vote on all of the department heads. And some people want to scale it back to, just the police and the fire chief and the commissioner of community safety, just a handful of positions, and others want to, maintain it as it is, where department leaders all go through a confirmation vote. Where do you stand on that?
Well, I don't want to bore your listeners too
No,
much
this is the podcast where we discuss the Charter Commission. Maybe we could sit over here?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. People don't understand the degree of difficulty in walking and talking and podcasting, so kudos to us so far. Now we're going to take a seat. Back to the Charter Commission. Where do you stand on the appointments charter change proposal?
So initially what I was worried about was just having, too many cooks in the kitchen and just having department directors, people apply to work for the city, and then all of a sudden they have 14 bosses and they don't know who to report to, and there's just like one council member is telling them to do this versus the mayor is telling them to do that, and then it's like, their head is spinning, and that really, I think, would deter people from wanting to work for the city. So that's my biggest concern. It's like, if we can get talented people to run our city departments, because they do the actual work, they manage their budgets, they declare snow emergencies, they fill potholes, they run departments. If you can have, if you can make sure that's running smoothly, that's my bottom line concern.
So in my mind, we settled the whole who's in charge, 14 bosses thing in 2021. Do you think we settled it then, or do you think?
I mean, I voted to have a strong mayor system. I just think it just keeps everything centralized. However, with this, surprise, the council wants more confirmation authority over department directors. I'm like, maybe we're not there yet.
So you kind of take the mayor's word for it that there's still some confusion. Does it not reflect poorly on him, though, that we're in a strong mayor system? The charter says he's in charge. If he still has department heads and staff who are confused about that, does that reflect poorly on him?
I think he's trying to compromise to an extent, but there is confusion out there, and as a charter commissioner, sometimes we have to get back to okay, what does the plain language of the charter say, so we don't get confused. But it's I mean, if we going back a few years, it's really interesting that we had to have that amendment in the first place.
So one of the things that kind of separates us politically, a question I like to ask is how do you interpret what has happened over the last 5 years? We've all lived through it, starting with COVID, and then the murder of George Floyd, civil unrest, and businesses have struggled. A lot of talk about the survival of downtown and uptown, but from a public safety and policing perspective, what is the story of how we got to where we are right now? Kind of define the problem a little bit.
Well, COVID didn't help. The shutdown just caused so much distrust and all this hardship on businesses, but we didn't know what was going on, so we had to do what we had to do. Masking, vaccinating, what have you. And then you add the George Floyd tragedy on top of that. So there are two independent major events that happened in our city. But I think they stem from the distrust in our government, the distrust in our police department, mainly. And I think all the chaos that's happening in our city and at City Hall stems from that distrust. And I don't want to dwell on this topic too much, but back to socialism, it's societies and countries that have socialism or modified socialism, people trust the government. People trust that as a citizen I'm being taken care of. I'm paying taxes and it's going to good use. With what's going on at the federal level, what's going on locally, we just lost this distrust. And I think that's kind of tearing our community apart.
So do you define the problem as progressive, socialist, like overreach? Like, are we defining the problem that way? Like, the story I tell myself is we have had a broken police department on the inside for maybe generations.
Oh yeah,
and left it unaddressed.
I wasn't surprised when George Floyd was murdered. It was gruesome, but I worked for the city attorney in Minneapolis, and I specifically worked, at the time we called them police misconduct cases, and on the civil side. And, I was a part of, when these cases went to court, like trial, I was part of, the litigation team. And at the time it was a paralegal. I remember this one specific case. But I wasn't surprised that I knew there was major problems within the police department. I knew that innocent people were dying at the hands of police, and I knew there needed to be major reform, and I knew that we as a city were paying for it. From costly settlement agreements. It's just too much money out the door, and it doesn't, countless trials and settlements, pertaining to police misconduct. It's just a waste of resources and money, whereas you can take that money and invest it into your police department, screen, train officers, recruit them, and then you save money on the front end, I believe. So yeah, it's just that the distrust is a huge part of the problem.
Do you think Ward 11 has been well served by Emily Koski as council member?
When I talk to residents, a lot of them say Emily Koski did her job. And 80% of being a council member is picking up the phone, answering an email, talking to a resident that has an issue with the city and finding a solution.
Right.
So, and people don't think that. Like the biggest part of it is service and being responsive. And when residents tell me, like, yeah, that was the best thing about Emily, is she found solutions to why, my street light was out, or why, things weren't the streets weren't plowed at the same time. Well, it's raining now, so. What's that saying? If you don't like the weather in Minnesota, wait 5 minutes.
I was not expecting this.
I was not expecting it either.
Maybe we go under the tree. You're not supposed to go under the tree in the rain, but maybe we can do that.
Okay.
Were you in the middle talking about
Yeah.
Emily Koski?
Yeah, so I think too, the big thing with Emily is, first of all, I had really good conversations with her, and she is a very intelligent woman, and whatever she does, she's going to pour her heart and soul into it and, make it work for her. And it goes to show how hard being, a city council person is in Minneapolis, where it's like you're asked to do so much more, and just put your life out there, and people are like, do you really want to do this? You're sacrificing a lot. And I'm just like, I want to share my experience working for the city for many years, and with my community that I love. And I think too, what people bothered, again, this is from my conversations with countless residents, what people were really upset about was they thought they were getting one thing and they got another.
With Koski?
Yeah. And
what do you think they got? What do you think they expected? And what do you think they actually got?
Again, there is this starvation for a moderate voice on the city council. And
was she not moderate enough?
It really depends on some of the I have to go back in my memory bank and look at the action she took, but there's this whole feeling about how she went DSA,
right.
And
which makes me laugh.
Yeah,
because she's not DSA.
But at the end of the day, the ugly truth is, like, when you're a council member, you're not, and this sounds brutal, but you're, and even as an elected, you're not really there to make friends. And that sounds bad, but it's just like you're there to represent your community and what your residents want. And then when, your residents want something and then you're like, well, let me do what these other council members want,
Right.
To, keep the city running. It's hard. It's really hard. And the need to be popular is, difficult. Some people just feel like I need to do what I need to do just to fit in. And I tell people like, hey, if I was in the business of being a people pleaser and if I wanted to be everybody's friend, I would sell ice cream. I wouldn't be running for a city council person.
So a little bit of the job of being a legislator is winning people over, right? It's a body of 13 and you're working towards majorities for certain policies. A lot of stuff is unanimous or near unanimous, but sometimes it's an 8-5 vote and you're trying to win people over. So you're kind of there to make friends, right? You want people to like you and feel good about your priorities and vote with you on stuff, right?
Well, that's the thing, I feel like you can be a decent human being without needing to be someone's quote unquote friend. And I think that's when, the disconnect happens, like, on the city council, like, I thought you were my friend, why did you vote against me, or, what have you. You can be open-minded, you can listen, you can be kind, you can be a decent person without necessarily being buddy-buddy with everybody.
You think that's motivating her? Just trying to please people? Do you think that's motivating some of the things she's doing? Like trying to be friends with people? Or is she disingenuous, you think?
I don't think so. I don't think so. And she has definitely raised some of her opposition when it came to some of the things the mayor did with police overtime. It's hard, but at the end of the day, what really matters is making sure your constituents are represented at City Hall.
Let's talk about encampments. Do you approve of the way the mayor's administration has handled homelessness and encampments over the last 2 terms?
So this is a very, very hard subject because when we talk about encampments, we need to realize we're talking about, people, human beings. And we need to make sure that, I call them residents too because they do live in Minneapolis. We need to make sure they're treated with dignity and respect. And the hard part with dealing with encampments and is all these temporary fixes. Like you can't just, I'm not a big fan of encampments. I don't like seeing them because it's not a safe place for people to be in for many reasons. And we've, in my job in St. Paul, working for Mayor Carter, we have similar issues, but we have the HEART program. Again, I don't want to get too into the details, but we just want to make sure residents have a place to go when encampments are torn down.
I think we get stuck in this binary of encampments, yes or no, and I think there is mostly agreement that we don't want encampments to exist. And people make the point that Mayor Frey has been mayor for 8 years. The encampments have existed under his encampment response policy. Like he's in charge of the administration, and these tragedies are happening under his encampment response policy. The shootings, the encampment fires. And so it's all well and good for him to hold like an indignant press conference saying, this is terrible, I'm against encampments. But like, what are you doing to prevent the encampments from forming, getting people housed, providing security in these neighborhoods that are facing the public safety issues that arise from being near encampments? I just feel like the whole conversation feels not very productive.
No,
do you approve of the way he's handled it?
To an extent, yes, because again, we can't have these encampments and these makeshift homes and shelters in our streets or in our parks.
Has he produced that result though?
I don't think so, but again, it's very difficult because it goes back to our housing crisis that we're having in Minneapolis. And we really need to make sure that when we're like, we don't want encampments, again, where are we going to find places for people to go? And I feel like there are individuals who, there's a new term called working homeless. There's individuals that aren't necessarily dealing with addiction or substance abuse or what have you. They have jobs, it's just that they can't afford to rent or have a home, and we really need to address that in Minneapolis. And for me, it's like we can't invest more money on temporary fixes. Taking down encampments that shouldn't be there in the first place is costing the city way too much money. What was it, over $300,000 in the last half of 2024 taking down encampments? I mean, that money can be used elsewhere in a more productive, permanent solutions to our city's problems. But we just need to, look at this as a whole. Look at people who do have addiction, where can they go? What resources with the county and the state can we tap into to make sure people are getting the treatment they need? How do we have more low barrier shelters in the city? And I don't talk about this often, but I volunteered for Catholic Charities before the pandemic, and it was so heartbreaking to me when they would turn people who are under the influence or high or drunk from coming in. Like, literally part of my job was to breathalyze people before they came in and sought shelter. And I'm like, it's freaking freezing outside. How are you going to turn this person away? So we do need more low barrier shelters in the city. We do need different types of housing in the city. And I'm saying this as, I'm not backed by developers or, anyone that has like, we're big housing advocates. We need these solutions to solve our problems in the city regarding with homelessness, affordability, keeping people in their homes, having people come, here in Minneapolis. We just need a very mixed market of housing and solutions.
How do we feel about rent control?
I am not in favor of rent control, mainly because the studies show it doesn't work.
So any variation of rent control you're against? Is there like a flavor that you would find acceptable?
Again, I would really have to do anything. When I say like I'm not in favor of this or I'm in favor of that, it needs to be backed by studies and research. And part of what I did in my career is when we wanted to implement new policies in St. Paul with Mayor Melvin Carter's office. When I was a policy associate, when I started there, it was like we did research on what other cities were doing, like St. Paul, and was it working? So I would just really have to look at the data and the research to really have a definitive answer on what kind of rent control would work in Minneapolis. But right now, it just looking at what is happening in St. Paul, it's not working. Are
we doing enough on renters' rights? Are there more policies needed? How do you feel? Housing
should, be a fundamental right, a human right. We're very far from getting there. I think we need to work with both landlords and renters to make sure renters are not unjustly evicted or not able to be in their homes or access their stuff. So I would definitely want to do some more digging on renters' rights and what we could improve, what we can do to improve living in the city for not just people who own homes here, but also for renters and what have you.
Weather report, it's coming down a little harder here on the shores of Lake Nokomis. We're pushing through the rain. Let's talk about transportation. I'm going to read a quote from the website that spoke to me a little bit. Enhancing bike lanes that are functional for both cyclists and drivers. So describe a bike lane to me that is functional for both cyclists and drivers. What are we talking about?
So just making sure that people who are biking feel safe, on the street, and just making sure there's the right amount of distance and turns are not weird and awkward. That's partly in addition to having some knee problems. That's another reason why I'm not a big biker, is because I don't feel safe on a bike in Minneapolis. Like on trails, yeah, but biking on a busy street, absolutely not.
So are we doing it right? Are we doing all those things you suggested, or are we doing it wrong currently?
There are some parts in the city that the bike lanes don't make sense, and I feel like that's just inviting people to get hurt, sue the city.
Which ones are we talking about? Like the painted lines on the street?
The painted lines, the pegs, you
posts?
see the posts, yeah. I mean, you see those like smashed by cars and flattened out. I mean, those are the investments that I feel like it really bothers me when I see that, because it's like we put so much money into making sure these posts are doing what they need to do, yet they're flattened and they're just not well thought out. So those are the changes I want to see, like getting it right the first time when we work on city projects.
So I think part of the reason for those is it's a quicker fix. Like it's easier to put up a string of those posts, and they're not perfect, but it's better than just paint on the street. So it's quicker, it's cheaper, easier to roll out than putting in a whole new curb separation, for example. Like it's temporary is how I see them. Just
these temporary fixes, whether housing, bike lanes, these are costing the city a ton of money. We need permanent solutions, permanent investments that we don't have to be like, oh, this didn't work, let's go back and fix it next year.
So is there an example of a street reconstruction or a street as it exists now where like they really did that well, that's a model, we should replicate what they did there? Like they made it so much better for bikers and pedestrians, and it's safer to drive on, safer to cross the street. Can you think of streets like that?
Bryant is, granted, it's a lot of concrete.
I hope you didn't look at my hat before you gave that answer. I hope.
Oh, there we go. Yeah, I've seen it. That didn't come to mind. No, I was just over there the other day, and I'm like, okay, I feel safe biking here, because I know there's no car traffic. There's enough room for pedestrians. Parking. You can't park on that street. It just makes sense. Now, can every city block be that way? No.
Right.
But maybe in places where it makes sense to have that type of construction.
You know what happens though is before and during the Bryant construction, people were so mad. It was such a controversy, and now that it's built, I don't know anyone who can look at it and experience it in person would say, I want to go back to the way it was. It is really nice. And so how do you deal with the politics of, if you're elected, people coming and saying no to your terrible, no good street reconstruction plan? We don't want it. We don't want to lose this parking, because it is often the people who live right there on the street get really upset. Are you able to say no? We're doing this for future generations. Sure, it's going to be hard in the interim, but it's going to be a better street. Like, how do you are you able to deal with those politics and tell people we're gonna do this street reconstruction as hard as it may be? So
generally, change is hard. I think regardless of what city project you're doing or what ordinance you're changing, or what resolution you're trying to pass, change is hard, and I think that's just human nature. But in terms of like construction, we're getting into many like subtopics. In terms of like construction, I think of what the lake in Lindale, the proposed construction there. If we can promise residents that, this is the plan, these are the studies, this is the research, and that the construction is going to get done on time. I know that businesses feel very strongly about this, that, you know, this construction, yes, it's going to, you know, impede people coming to your, you know, establishment for a little bit, but we, you know, in the future, this is going to be great for everybody. We want to make sure that this project gets done on time. I think that's a huge factor. It's like when the city does a project, like making sure it's done as quickly and as correctly as possible so we don't have to do it again. And just being very transparent with residents, like this is what's going on, this is what was proposed, and, you know, hopefully, you know, with the data and the research, it's going to improve everybody's lives. But with Bryant specifically, I think people, parking is an issue, and especially when we talk about new construction, there are ways where you can have multi, you know, family units in areas that make sense. I'm not saying take up, you know, a city single family lot and put like 5-6 plexes on it, because that does cause parking issues, and that people, you know, I have a lot of residents that are worried about, myself included, like if a street becomes too congested, can an emergency vehicle come through? Like I think of Tangletown too, with all the ups and downs. It's like, you know, if an ambulance needed to get to your home, would they be able to do that? So just really, when starting any project, just having open communication and making sure it's done correctly and on time, and it's going to benefit everyone in the long run, is super important. And
So the Star Tribune asked candidates who they were supporting for mayor, and I don't recall everyone's answer. Like, how did you answer that question?
I am supporting Mayor Fry. He is going to be my number one choice for mayor. And mainly that's because I am very worried about what's going to happen to the city with all this, you know, ICE business and presence, and what's going on with, you know, cuts to federal funding and what Donald Trump is doing to Democratic cities. You know, I have a feeling that Mayor Fry has a good grasp on that, and we need, he has the most experience. You can't, you know, a reasonable person can't disagree with that. He's been in office for quite some time. I just feel like he, out of all the candidates, he's going to be able to get things done from day one.
How do you feel about this? City level income tax on high earners. Steve Brandt's been talking about that a lot. How do you feel about that? Because we have, you know, we want to reduce the property tax burden on people, and one way to do that is bring in more revenue. How do you feel about an income tax or maybe other sources of revenue?
So my biggest thing is making sure people are not priced out of their homes in their city. I think of my parents who have lived here. They, you know, came here from the Middle East in the 70s, and each year they're on a fixed income, and each year their property taxes jumped, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like you guys are on a fixed income, you're retired, are you going to be able to live here? Are you just going to ask me to cover the tab? No, it's something that I feel very strongly about, and I do believe if we mitigate all the waste and financial irresponsibility at City Hall, we don't have to raise property taxes by 7% every year. Now, I don't think that having a higher income tax is going to be the solution.
On high earners? You're not into that?
So I've been also following what's going on in New York, the mayor's race in New York, and, you know, kind of what Mamdani's doing. I'm very, you know, he's making good points, but I question whether or not he's going to be able to deliver on his promises with, you know, making buses free childcare. I mean, all that costs money, and realistically, like when you're running, you really have to, you know, be real about what you can and can't do on the city council. Like I can't go in and make all these things happen that I know won't realistically happen. Like I'm going down a rabbit hole, but I just don't want people to be like making false promises. And I hear that a lot from other candidates, like, I'm going to come in and fix the schools, and like, you can't really do that on the city council. Or back to the high earners thing, maybe you can do that in New York. Maybe, if you tax billionaires that live in New York City, you can get, the job done and you can deliver on your promises. I don't know how many billionaires live in Minneapolis, and the higher earners that do live in the city, I'm worried that, and this is not just for higher earners, this is for everybody, I'm worried that when we raise taxes or put on income taxes, they'll be like, I'm done. Like, I'm not getting what I'm paying for. I don't feel safe in my community as I used to. My city services are not what they are, yet I'm paying so much more to live here, where I can move to the burbs and have a bigger house, a yard where my kid can play in, where I can be safe, for paying less in property taxes. So that's something that I'm very hesitant to, implement, because I don't want to push out our tax base in Minneapolis.
So you talked about working for Mayor Carter, and I think I heard you at the recent Ward 11 forum talking about, like, I'm going to paraphrase you, and correct me if I get you incorrect, but like, how a city should be run. Like, a city should be run well. And I'm wondering if there are things in St. Paul that are transferable to Minneapolis, what those are, what are the lessons from St. Paul that you'd want to implement in Minneapolis?
So the biggest picture in running a city government is making sure what you can do is feasible. And when I started at St. Paul, and with Mayor Melvin Carter's office in St. Paul, we were looking at having earned sick and safe leave. You can say that 3 times. Earned sick and safe leave in the city. And we put so much time and resources and energy in having all these, coalitions and reaching out to people. And we realized that we couldn't do that as a city on our own. It had to happen at the state level. So for me, it's just making sure when you get elected and when you go into City Hall, you're able to, be very thoughtful about what you can and can't do as a city council member. And again, when we look at St. Paul and Minneapolis, it's interesting because I call it the tale of two cities. A lot of times people that live in Minneapolis have no idea what's going on in St. Paul, and vice versa. There are really great things that Minneapolis has that St. Paul doesn't have, like garbage collection. And there are good things that St. Paul has that Minneapolis doesn't have. So I just want to take my experience and what I've seen happen at both city halls and share it and implement it here in Minneapolis, my forever home. A few weeks ago there was an article in the Strib, and I was about the council races, the top 5 races to watch, and surprisingly Ward 11 is there.
Open seat.
Open seat. And I was just reading through the comments, and I'm like, yeah, a lot of people don't really realize what city council members do or not supposed to. Sadly, city council people, we can't liberate Gaza.
Right.
This is a hard point. I'm half Palestinian. I hate what's going on in the Middle East. And honestly, this has been a very hard point. I've had to really think about, like, the whole ceasefire Gaza resolution. It's like, yes, it's great. However, this is not a city issue, and we really need to get back to making sure we're talking about city issues.
These resolutions at the council, like, they do a lot of them, and most of them, the vast majority, 99% of them, don't make the news, and they are often on things that are either a federal issue or like, we support Ukrainians, for example, and it doesn't make the news because it's not standing up against a genocide, and unfortunately, like, it's a divisive issue. But also, like, if people look at what's happening and they want to use a little bit of their power as a public figure to speak out on it, to say, hey, everyone, look at what is happening. We want you to take notice, and maybe I don't have the power to stop it, but I want to bring attention to it. Is that not part of the role of being an elected official sometimes?
There is a place and time to do that, and you know, when you're out and about, not at City Hall or not on the clock or not, you know, using taxpayer city resources, by all means, like, yes, like, tell us how you feel about genocide or certain things going on, you know, outside of Minneapolis. However, you know, I work with a lot of resolutions in St. Paul, and putting them together is not, it takes time. Sometimes it takes a few drafts, that takes time. It has to go through all these other city employees. It has to get on the council agenda. It has to be publicized. You know, you have to let the newspapers know. It's a lot of time and effort and energy to work on, you know, I mean, every resolution differs. But then when you add the veto on top of that, when a resolution gets vetoed and back to the mayor's office, again, it's just like all these resources being used to litigate not city issues.
Does that mean we should not do any of the resolutions, even the non-controversial ones? Or, because eventually, I mean, you essentially say, well, Israel-Palestine, that one's off the table, but we'll do one about the Ukrainians because it's not controversial. It's like, I don't know, it feels like a little bit of a double standard.
I mean, I want to make sure that what we're doing at City Hall has to do with city business. Now, if we're talking about sanctuary cities, yes, this is a city issue. Immigrants are our neighbors. What can we do to make sure that they are protected in our community? Then it's a city issue. Like abortion, not a city issue, but when it comes to like zoning, you know, an abortion care clinic, okay, then it becomes a city issue. So there are things where it's like you're way left field, and it doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily something that has to take up city resources and time. I'm not saying they're not important. It's just there's a time, place for everything. And I feel like, especially, again, this is very difficult for me to say, but the Gaza resolution, for example, was not, I think, warranted to be at City Hall or on the council agenda.
So there was a question at the League of Women Voters Forum a couple of days ago about, I think it was, if there's one thing you could accomplish as a council member, what would it be? And you mentioned public safety, making your community safer and making people feel safe. And so how does a council member who is not the boss of police, who can control the police budget, like how do you see yourself accomplishing that in your role as a council member?
The number one way we can get anything done at City Hall is to have less discourse and just be more respectful and open to listening to other people's opinion. And I think that's where it starts. It's like really listening to what is being proposed and really just taking into account, you know, what the police budget looks like and where are the gaps, and just really, you know, drilling down into all the details. And I feel like when our police department and our chief is not supported, I think that's part of how our department becomes weaker, how people don't necessarily want to work for MPD. I mean, when you think about it, it's like, you know, growing up, you know, everyone was like, you know, when your kid's in school, it's like, who wants to be a police officer? And kids would raise their hand. Nobody does that anymore. No one wants to. And I mean, I feel like if you're a parent and your kid says you want to be a police officer, you'll be like in shock. Like, you really want that? No, we just need to make sure that, at the city level, that our police department is supported, number one, and then that we build that trust within our community so police can actually go and do the policing that they need to do in a dignified manner to bring crime down. And I feel like just having police presence too, again, this is getting into the details, but just having more police presence around deters crime. And as a city council member, you're a part of that. You're a part of, like, what does this police budget look like, or what can we do to make sure our chief and our department, not just for the police, but our department directors, are supported.
So, do you think the police budget should have gone up more than it has over the last 5 years? Because maybe this is a misconception among a lot of people, but like, it has gone up every year since 2020. Like, there was no defunding. Mayor Fry has generally gotten within, a very small amount of every police budget he's wanted, and the chart goes up. So is it not going up fast enough in your mind?
I don't think so. And now I'm not saying
it should have gone up faster.
It should have gone faster. I'm not saying we need to give the police department a blank check. Not all problems can be solved with money. That's number one, and I think we're seeing that at the police department. I do want to see our recruiting levels of police. I know it's getting better, but I do want to see more officers staffed, more people working, more people wanting to be MPD officers, and really looking at what that takes to make happen. It's not just about money, it's not just about funding, it's about staffing, it's about retaining officers, it's making sure officers are supported, making sure that police officers want to work for a Minneapolis Police Department, versus like the other suburbs. It's making sure that officers have the resources they need to feel supported when they are encountering a tragedy, and making sure that we do have mental health responders and workers who can fill in the gaps but just take on issues that don't necessarily need a police officer to address.
So you mentioned supporting the police and supporting the chief. Is there a tension between rhetoric like support the chief and support the police? And I assume you also mean not just money, but like moral support.
Right.
Is there a tension between that and like police accountability? Because some people will say
100%.
You're criticizing the chief because he did this. Like, we could use the Davis Maturi example and say you're not supporting the chief, and it's often used as a way to say, be quiet, stop criticizing the chief. Like, do you see a tension there between the political rhetoric, support the chief, and like the ability to hold police accountable?
So obviously I want, our police department, our officers, and the chief to, do their job in a dignified, professional, compassionate manner. When I say support the police department, I'm not saying we should support officers that don't comply with policy or deviate from their job or don't protect us with courage. So I guess I'm a little unclear about what your question.
So maybe I can ask it this way. Like, can you think of an example of when an elected official has not supported the police? Because often it's used in cases where there is criticism on a specific issue, like Davis Maturi. I think the chief did some victim blaming there and blamed Davis Maturi for getting shot by his neighbor when all he had been doing for 6 months or more is asking for help from the police. And so can you think of examples that are not that, where the police have not been supported in the way that they should have?
You know, that's an interesting, you bring that up, that case. You know, I don't know all the details, or I'm not recalling the details of that case offhand, so I'm not going to comment on that. But I just feel like the whole, you know, some council members that are still talking about defunding the police is wild. That concept that first came about a few years ago, just who wants to be in, you know, a city without a police department? And no one. I mean, if you're a victim of a crime or have been, you realize how important it is to have police show up to your home or wherever you are to help you. And I mean, there are things about MPD that I don't necessarily agree with. And one thing that comes to mind is the officer that shot there was involved shooting when he was executing a warrant. Shot an individual, and that just really didn't sit well with the community. And then that officer was given the role of leading an officer, you know, training, like use of force training. That blew my mind. That really blew my mind. That's something where I didn't agree with. It's like, okay, what led the chief to put an officer who was, you know, involved in a very, I don't want to say confrontational, but not in a good light to lead such a delicate training. And that makes me think of, like, what were the problems? What led that decision to be made? For me, it's like, well, maybe they couldn't find anyone else and they just needed someone to do that. Again, it's not a justification, but it's like, were you not thinking this through? And again, that flows from why people distrust, you know, the police department, why people have this distrust in our city leaders.
So do you think we've covered it all?
A lot of people ask me, you know, how am I different than the other candidates?
That's a good one. I should have asked that. You're right.
That's a very
So let's do it for Jamison Whiting, because, you know, Jamison Whiting's the favorite. He's got all the endorsements. Tell us how you're different and why it should be you and not him.
So he is a nice guy. Jim Meyer is also an amazing person.
Jim Meyer's not going to win. Jim Meyer's not going to win.
You know, I had Jim Meyer ran as a Democrat.
Is he not running as a Democrat?
He's an independent.
Okay.
He's an independent. You know, I really like where Jim Meyer's coming from. I love his message on financial responsibility. I told Jim, I'm like, had you run earlier, I probably wouldn't have decided to run myself. No, Jamison is a great guy. The thing that really bothers me about his campaign, and again, running for city council or any type of public office has been, you know, a very out of my comfort zone, because I'm naturally an introvert. I never thought I would be running for any type of public office.
Or podcasting in the rain.
Podcasts in the rain. You know, I've always been the behind the scenes, like, kind of gal working on things, like typing away, you know, as an advisory position, data, research nerd, what have you. Never in my life would I thought to be here in front of all these people talking about me and my campaign. So running was a very tough decision. It surprised a lot of people in my family. They're like, oh my gosh, like, why are you doing this? You know, and especially after, you know, the Hortman-Hoffman shooting. Any candidate that has a serious campaign that wants to make a difference in our city, I greatly appreciate their efforts. But my campaign is different because I'm just an average person with all this. You know, I've had the privilege of working for all these great leaders, R.T. Ryback, Mayor Carter, just all these wonderful individuals, and working for the Minneapolis City Attorney, the Ramsey County Attorney, being on the Charter Commission. It's just like I'm an average resident that wants to share my experience to make our city great. I'm not a politician, as you can tell by my word stumbling, and I'm just like, what do I say? And I just feel like we need more average people running for city council, like people that want to make difference. Like, we shouldn't have people being deterred because campaigns are too expensive. Endorsement too, and endorsements are important, but I haven't actively gone out of my way to seek them. Like, organizations send me questionnaires and I fill them out, as many questionnaires as I can, just to get people to know, like, this is who you're voting for. Like, I'm not trying to win orgs, unions over. I'm not, again, labor unions, super important work that they're doing in our community. But a lot of organizations and unions endorsed Jameson before I ran. Mm-hmm. So that just made me kind of think about, like, oh, okay, this is weird. There's only one candidate running and this union or this org endorsed them. That kind of was like, it made me kind of think about
Did it motivate
the
you to get
endorsement
in?
process. No, not really. I'll be honest, I was very uncomfortable with the fact that Jameson didn't have any policy positions regarding his campaign on his website. But it was only like 2 weeks before the endorsing convention where I saw actual policy positions on, like, what he wants to do in our community. And, like, when you vote for someone, it's like, and again, this is why I think people kind of got a little burned by Emily. It's like, where are you going? What are you doing? Like, you want to know what, the person you're voting for is, their policy positions and what they're advocating for. And, following Jameson's campaign, when he decided to run, I think it was like a few days after Emily announced
that sounds
her run for mayor, I'm like, okay. Like, I waited it out, just reviewing his website, no policy positions, waiting until someone else from the ward would run. We have a lot of talented individuals living here. No one wanted to do this job. It just made me very uncomfortable. It's like, okay, I don't know what I'm voting for. I don't know where he stands on certain issues. We're a little clearer now, like, after talking and debates and forums, but it shouldn't take all these events and all these, hot seat moments to know where a candidate is sitting. So that just made me very, very uncomfortable. And, winning a council race shouldn't just be based on, like, endorsements. It should be really based on the relationships you have with your neighbors and people that, want to see our city grow and have the same values and vision for our community.
Mariam, did you watch the Jameson Whiting episode where I absolutely crushed him on the basketball court? Were you cheering me on? Were you like, yes, take him down?
I will say, I did get motion sickness while I was watching it, so I went into audio mode. Yeah, I did listen to it. I think a few days after. Yeah, you guys got ice cream.
I also crushed him on the basketball court.
You also crushed him on the basketball court.
Yes. Well, Mariam Demello, running for City Council in Ward 11, thank you for joining me here in the rain on Lake Nokomis.
Thank you for being with me on this nice Minneapolis rainy day.
Good luck to you the rest of the way. This has been the Wedge Live podcast. I'm your host, John Edwards. Thank you for listening.
This is a real thing. Real thing.
None of you have the balls to stop this. Stop this.
I've got plenty of time. going on today?
We're in the Wedge neighborhood right now, 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 right now.